We open in Florida in 1980. A little girl named Violet is on a camping trip with her family. She wanders away from the campsite and into the woods, where she finds a woman sitting alone by a lake. The woman introduces herself as Rose the Hat, and she seems friendly at first, showing Violet some magic tricks. But then Violet notices other people lurking in the trees, watching them. Rose tells Violet she has something special inside her, something magical. Before Violet can react, Rose and all the other people converge on her. Something terrible is about to happen. We cut to Danny Torrance, now a young boy living with his mother, Wendy. They've escaped the Overlook Hotel, but Danny is still dealing with the trauma. He hasn't spoken since their ordeal there, and he's having nightmares about the spirits from the hotel. We see the terrifying woman from room 237, known as the Bathtub Lady. One day, Danny is sitting outside when he encounters the spirit of Dick Halloran, the cook who tried to save them at the Overlook. Dick teaches Danny an essential trick for dealing with evil spirits. He tells him to imagine boxes in his mind to trap these spirits and lock them away. Wendy comes out and sees Danny sitting alone on the bench, even though he was talking to Dick. That night, Danny and Wendy are watching TV together. Danny excuses himself to use the bathroom, and that's where the Bathtub Lady is waiting for him. But this time, Danny is ready. He uses Dick's trick, visualizing a box in his mind, and manages to trap her inside. When he returns to his mother, he finally starts speaking again. It's a small victory, but an important one. We jump forward to 2011. Danny, who now goes by Dan, is living in New Jersey, and things are not going well. He's become an alcoholic, following in his father's destructive footsteps. We see him get into a violent bar fight where he knocks someone unconscious. Later that night, he goes home with a woman from the bar. When he wakes up the next morning, he discovers the woman has a young child, and he realizes he's stolen money from them. This moment seems to be Dan's rock bottom. Meanwhile, in Long Island, we meet a teenager named Andy. She's meeting with an older man she found online, but she has special abilities. Andy can manipulate people into doing what she wants, and she leaves a strange cut on their cheek that looks like a snake bite. Rose the Hat and her companion Crow Daddy are watching from a distance. They're impressed with Andy's powers. Rose approaches her after and takes her to meet their group, a cult called the True Knot. Rose nicknames her Snakebite Andy and tells her about their way of life. She promises they can eat well, stay young, and live long. We're introduced to 5-year-old Abra Stone in Anniston, New Hampshire. It's her birthday party, and her parents, Dave and Lucy, notice something impossible happening in the kitchen. Abra has somehow made all the spoons float up to the ceiling. She says abracadabra, and makes them crash down onto the table. This little girl has extraordinary powers. Dan arrives in Fraser, New Hampshire, looking for a fresh start. He meets a local man named Billy Freeman, and they become friends. Dan admits to Billy that he's running away from something in his past. Billy helps Dan find a place to stay and vouches for him with the landlord. That night, Rose brings Andy to the beach for a ceremony with the True Knot. The eldest member, Grandpa Flick, leads the ritual. Rose pulls out a canister containing what she calls steam. It's actually Violet's shine, the magical essence she took from the little girl at the beginning. Rose feeds this steam to Andy while the other cult members get their share. Andy screams and writhes as she absorbs the power. It's a disturbing scene that shows us what the True Knot really does. They hunt people with special abilities and consume their essence to stay young and powerful. Dan is still struggling with nightmares about spirits. Billy takes him to an Alcoholics Anonymous meeting, which is a turning point for Dan. After the meeting, Billy introduces Dan to Dr. John Dalton. Using his shining abilities, Dan tells Dr. Dalton something only he would know, that he left his watch in a bathroom. Dr. Dalton is amazed, and with Billy's recommendation, he offers Dan a job at the local hospice. During his first night shift, Dan notices the hospice cat, Azzy, walking into an elderly patient's room. The patient explains that whenever Azzy sits on someone's bed, it means that person is going to pass away soon. The man is frightened at first, But Dan uses his telepathic abilities to comfort him, assuring him that passing on is just like going to sleep. The man peacefully passes away, and he nicknames Dan Dr. Sleep before he goes. When Dan returns home that night, he finds something written on his wall. "Hello," with a smiley face in the O. Someone with the Shining is trying to reach him. Dan writes back, "Hi." We jump to the present day, 2019. Dan has been sober for 8 years now. At an AA meeting, he shares his feelings about his father, Jack. He never really knew him, but he felt closest to him when he was drinking. Dan realizes his father fought the same battle with alcoholism, but Dan has chosen a different path. Dan continues his work at the hospice, helping patients transition peacefully. We also learn he's been communicating regularly with Abra, who's now 13 years old and still has powerful Shining abilities. The True Knot has been struggling. They haven't had a good source of steam in a while, surviving on weak leftovers. They track down a young baseball player named Bradley Trevor, who has some Shining abilities that help him during games. Snakebite Andy uses her powers to make Bradley get into their van. They take him to a secluded area and pin him down. What happens next is truly horrifying. They eliminate him while he's terrified and in pain, feeding on his essence. The scene is brutal and shows how truly evil the True Knot is. At the exact moment Bradley is being attacked, Abra is at home and suddenly begins screaming. She cries to her parents that a boy has been eliminated. She actually witnessed the murder through her Shining abilities. At the same time, Rose senses Abra's presence during the attack and refers to her as a looker, someone watching from afar. Dan also senses something is wrong. He sees red rum written on his wall, murder spelled backward, a callback to The Shining. He asks Abra, "Who?" And she writes back, "Baseball boy." Abra starts researching Bradley's disappearance online. At school, she can hear all her classmates' thoughts. When she gets home, she has visions of the True Knot and where they are. She looks out her window and finds herself floating, connected telepathically to Rose, who's at a supermarket miles away. Rose manages to see Abra and tries to establish contact, but Abra is powerful enough to push Rose out of her mind. The psychic push is so strong that Rose is physically thrown across the supermarket floor. Rose is both amazed and threatened by Abra's power. She tells Crow that Abra's shine might be too powerful for them, which means they need to destroy her. Dan and Abra finally meet in person and explain their gifts to each other. Dan calls it the Shining, or Tony, like having an imaginary friend. Abra thought Dan was her imaginary friend all these years. After she tells him about the True Knot and what she witnessed, Dan warns her not to use her shine in any way that might attract their attention. One night at work, Dan follows Azzy into a patient's room. But instead of a patient, he finds Dick Halloran's spirit waiting for him. It's the first time they've seen each other since Danny was a child. Dick warns Dan about what the True Knot really does, and he urges Dan to protect Abra because they share a special connection. Dick also tells Dan this will be the last time they see each other, a bittersweet goodbye. Rose meditates and manages to get into Abra's head while she's sleeping. She finds what looks like filing cabinets in Abra's mind and starts searching through them. But Abra anticipated Rose would come back, so she set a trap. She slams a drawer shut on Rose's hand, causing Rose to tear her skin as she yanks it free. When Rose wakes up, the injury follows her into the real world. She reports to the others that Abra is more dangerous than they thought. Around this time, Grandpa Flick, the oldest True Knot member, is cycling, their term for dying. He's too weak to continue, and he decays while the cult absorbs his remaining steam. Abra contacts Dan and asks for his help in finding Bradley's body. She explains that if she can touch his baseball glove, she can locate the cult. With Billy's help, Dan follows Abra's directions to the site where Bradley is buried. Dan and Billy dig up the body, and they're both horrified by what they find. They bring the glove back to Abra's house, but there's a problem. Abra's father, Dave, has learned about her contact with Uncle Dan and thinks Dan is a dangerous stranger. After Dan and Abra demonstrate their powers, Dave finally believes them. Abra touches the glove and manages to track where the True Knot is heading next. Dan and Billy head into the woods to set a trap for the cult, using Abra as bait. But Abra appears from the safety of her kitchen, projecting herself through her shining abilities. Dan and Billy hide and open fire on the cult members. Rose feels the pain as each member is eliminated one by one. Billy shoots Snakebite Andy, but with her dying breaths, she uses her manipulation powers one last time. She makes Billy turn the weapon on himself, and he's gone instantly. It's a devastating loss. Meanwhile, Crow Daddy breaks into Abra's house and eliminates Dave, then kidnaps Abra. Dan returns home and uses his shining to link his mind with Abra's, briefly possessing her body. Together, they cause Crow to crash his vehicle into a tree. Since he wasn't wearing his seatbelt, he's thrown through the windshield and eliminated on impact. Dan finds Abra and picks her up. They drive to make their final stand at the Overlook Hotel, the place where Dan's trauma began. The hotel is now run down and condemned, but it still holds all those dark memories and spirits. Dan walks through the building, confronting his past. He finds room 237, still marked with axe cuts from his father. He makes his way to the mezzanine and encounters a bartender named Lloyd, who looks strikingly similar to Jack Torrance. Lloyd insists he's just the bartender, but Dan knows better. Dan tells Lloyd about how his mother, Wendy, passed away when he was 20. He knew she was dying because of the flies he would see around people close to death, another aspect of his shining. Lloyd drops his act and channels Jack Torrance, Dan's father, before drinking the beverage he offered Dan. It's a haunting moment where Dan confronts the ghost of his father. Rose arrives at the Overlook, and the final battle begins. Dan and Abra work together, using their combined powers to trap Rose in the hotel's frozen hedge maze. Abra manages to wound Rose by cutting her legs, but Rose is incredibly powerful. She breaks free and overpowers them. Abra runs while Dan faces Rose alone. Rose gets into Dan's mind and sees all his fear and trauma from the hotel. She starts absorbing his shine, thinking she's won. But then Rose notices boxes in Dan's mind, the ones Dick taught him to use all those years ago. She believes they contain more power than she can take. But Dan has other plans. He unleashes all the spirits he's trapped over the years, the Grady twins, the bathtub lady, and all the other ghosts from the Overlook. The spirits surround Rose and consume her shine, destroying her completely. But then they turn their attention to Dan. They possess him and take control. Dan finds Abra, but she can sense what's happening. She taps into his mind and realizes he made a stop at the hotel's boiler room. Dan knows what he has to do. Dan sends Abra outside to safety. He stays behind, possessed by the spirits, leading them to the boiler room. He lets the Overlook finally explode in flames, destroying the hotel and the evil within it, once and for all. Abra watches from outside as the building goes up, knowing Dan sacrificed himself to save her and end this nightmare. Sometime later, we see Abra continuing her life. She still communicates with Dan's spirit, just like Dan once communicated with Dick. When her mother, Lucy, asks who she's talking to, Abra at first denies it, but then admits she was talking to both Dan and her father. Lucy seems to have accepted Abra's powers now. Before Abra and her mother sit down to watch TV, Abra excuses herself to use the bathroom. The bathtub lady is waiting inside, just like she once waited for young Danny. But Abra is ready. She's learned from Dan, and she knows exactly how to handle the spirits. The movie ends with Abra confidently facing this challenge, showing us that Dan's legacy lives on. And that's Dr. Sleep. This movie is really about cycles. The cycle of addiction, the cycle of trauma, and how we break those cycles. Dan spends the entire film fighting the same demons his father fought. But unlike Jack, Dan chooses to be better. He stays sober, helps people, and ultimately sacrifices everything to protect Abra. The film also explores found family and mentorship. Dick saved Danny, Danny saved Abra, and now Abra has the tools to save herself. It's a story about how we heal from trauma, not by forgetting it or running from it, but by confronting it and choosing to break the pattern. The true knot represents parasitic evil that feeds on innocence and power, while Dan represents someone who uses his gifts to comfort and help others. That contrast is at the heart of what makes this movie work. If you enjoyed this recap, please hit that like button and subscribe for more movie breakdowns. Drop a comment below and let me know. Have you seen Dr. Sleep? How do you think it compares to The Shining? I love hearing your thoughts. Thanks so much for watching, and I'll see you in the next video.